All right. Good morning, Admin Mastermind and Teach Better family. So excited to be with a special guest this week that is on screen with me. You probably have seen her around, noticed all the fabulous things that she's doing in education. Sarah Johnson, thank you so much for not only joining me for the recap, but then also being a part of the Admin Mastermind this morning.
Pleasure is mine. It was wonderful to be a part of the community that you've built and to hear all the great ideas that they had together.
Well, this morning we asked, as we do often, for our admin mastermind to bring up topics that are relevant to them. We've got a different model going on. We used to pre-plan them out, but we listen to those who are participants, and we know that there's a lot of different things going on in your buildings and on your school district. And so this was brought up by one of our admin mastermind participants, and they were there this morning. They were asking about how to avoid the one-size-fits-all approach when designing professional development. So I know I've fallen in this trap. Sarah, I don't know if you have also, but I know there were some things that were presented at the beginning of some of the traps that we fall into when it comes to PD. And I didn't know if there were some takeaways that you got from the start of the conversation.
Yeah, as I was listening, a huge challenge that it seems like people are facing is just the communication between people who might be in charge at the district level versus the building level, and how to engage all of their staff with what they need in a timely manner. I actually don't know if this was necessarily brought up because the cohort seemed to be less about acknowledging barriers and more about really just trying to find solutions, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But I think that just the amount of time that we have and how to use time was kind of a theme that wove throughout the conversation and was where it kind of ended too.
Yeah, no, it was great. The conversation was full circle when it comes to PD models. And I don't know if we want to touch on that as far as, since there were a lot of solutions, maybe talking through some of the things that were successful for folks, because I felt like there was ample amount of things brought up in regards to, what we should do as administrators when trying to not only plan professional development, but then also the execution.
Yes. Well, I heard some really great examples of practitioners that are very mindful about making sure that there is relevant professional development provided. But also, one of the things they talked about was having systems for follow up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that I found inspirational from several of the people who shared their examples, where if they had a particular focus on an initiative, they would create a system that would allow for them to follow up specifically with their teachers, to kind of document what those teacher goals were and to have those conversations with them throughout the rest of the year that was tied to whatever professional development they had, say like at a beginning of the year PD or a mid-year institute, which is really cool.
Well, and I want to talk through what you had mentioned in regards to your own experience, which is kind of the one-off PD and sometimes, what that looks like versus what it could be as far as, implementing a plan. So do you mind sharing out, just what you had talked about with the group?
I guess for me, I just shared that I was reflecting upon, I've been in education for 20 some years. I don't know the number anymore.
That long.
That long, right? But just having a range of experience in regard to the support for professional development as a learning mechanism versus something we just, kind of have to do contractually. I don't know if I worded it that way, but from the lens of somebody who comes into districts, I think that's what you're talking about, is that for me, coming off of the mindset of being a person who wants to grow, who also wants to help staff grow, it's really hard to be called in and do what I call this one and done. I can do the inspirational message and I can make authentic connections and the day can feel really great, but it feels very hollow for me walking away and knowing that, okay, they're not going to do anything with this.
Yeah.
Part of that is just because you have a dialed in community. When administrators aren't present at the sessions that I'm offering, that's always kind of a red flag for me as somebody coming in doing professional development with staff. But also, yeah, I just said that one of the things that people could consider is if they're bringing in somebody like me or like you, who's got the ability to bring a message, what plan for a follow-up. It's good to have an inspirational message from people outside of the district, but is there an ability either for me to come back within the contract to connect back with your staff again, or is it something that you can do, through staff meetings, through professional learning, through one-on-one meetings, where you're just making sure that you follow back up with it? So it's not like, oh, that one time that person came and they said this. It's actually woven through the work that they do throughout the rest of the year. That was my insight that I'd like to see. And, it was really cool because your team picked it up and they're like, yes, we do. We've done book studies, right? So,
Yep.
they would bring you in and they would talk about your book potentially, but then you would either facilitate or they would facilitate an in-house book study. And I thought that was a really great way to address exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, I liked, and maybe this is a good segue, is just the opportunity to have teachers a part of that process, not only gaining their feedback, but then also being a participant to disseminate the knowledge or to facilitate conversation. I think book study was one way to do that, which, they had talked about teachers having conversations with each other based on the chapters, or maybe taking away key points from the material read and then, sharing that out with the staff. I think there was some interpretive sketches and things that were happening on campuses too. So there was some creativity with that, with the book study. But then also having the author come back for multiple sessions, potentially to speak on the book itself and help kind of work through that conversation with the teachers. But I know there were some other models discussed in regards to getting the teachers' input based on feedback, but then also how they can participate in the professional development itself. So did you have any key points for that, Sarah, in regards to how to get the teachers involved?
Well, a couple of my takeaways as I was listening to the people share their multiple viewpoints was having staff do, whether it's, kind of an in-house conference where they're offering PD sessions, or if it's they've gone to a conference and now they're bringing back the learning. They talk about making sure that there's compensation of some sort, which I appreciated hearing, because we want to make sure that if our staff are providing value add to our other staff, that they are acknowledged for that. And however that comes through, there's obviously multiple ways to compensate. But then also one of the participants talked about how he set the tone with the people who are going to be speaking as that we want to make sure that your PD is engaging and there's a takeaway and it's inspiring, right? So just remembering that it's not always easy to get teachers to, as you say, deliver a message, because sometimes teachers can be the most challenging audience. There's that stigma out there, and sort of true, right? That there's an element on both ends to make sure that whatever you're providing is interesting. But yeah, making sure that staff are delivering messages to one another. And I really appreciated a couple of people talked about the fact that they wanted to have a mix of internal and external experts, because that you have the people in the building who have the answers too, and creating supportive mechanisms to share that.
Yeah, which was a model similar to like a ed camp type of situation
Yes.
where they had teachers, presenting, and then also there was another suggestion about creating an in-house conference for the district where they had keynote speakers coming in, but then they also had sessions for people to sign up for. So it was very differentiated for the staff, similar to what we would do for our students, which I absolutely love. So, if you're in a district that can do that, that's fantastic. I know we had a variety of different folks coming from very small districts to very large. So there was a mix of experiences, but definitely a lot of different models presented this morning, which obviously created a very rich conversation.
Yes.
All right. I know we can't get through everything, Sarah, because I have pages of notes from our conversation, because I know we talked about a lot of different things, but I did want to touch on just as far as, the data analysis and assessment that is associated with PD, because I think this is an important conversation to have, because it's one thing to have a one-off, but then let's say we do it in a sense that we have a lot of touch points, we have it's implemented throughout the year. Where do we go from there? What are we using to say, is this working? Is it being effective? Is it changing the culture? Is it changing anything on the campus? So, either for yourself in your own experience or what was discussed this morning, what role should data have as far as the decision making for PD year long?
Well, I think there was such a rich discussion around the models that we probably didn't dive into this one, probably as much as we could have. But in my own opinion, I
Yeah.
do believe that obviously student data and what would best impact students is what we need to be using for our professional development planning. And, since you mentioned my own experience, we do continuous improvement plans. And so that hopefully, if you get that work done at the end of a school year, you can help guide the next year, and you can have a PD plan that is not just month to month.
Yeah.
That hopefully there's an umbrella that's guiding it. One of the people shared that their focus was, for example, like visible learning, right? And we know that that's obviously a hot topic, and one that has multiple resources. Of course, here in Teach Better, you can talk standards-based, all the things, right? But the idea being that if you can tie it back to some type of data that you can then use as program evaluation, is important. And I think that probably is one thing that we honestly miss in our cycles of evaluation, Joshua. I think we probably do a decent job from what I've seen of planning, but then how are we doing the program evaluation is a really big question. I know you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation did touch on student data as far as like incorporating that in the decision making. I think also just in communication with your staff, like I think it's very important that you're providing data in regards to students, and also showing like this initiative is working, like, or it's not working. I guess it could go either way, but we need to have something to create a baseline, but then also show what the effects are from the professional development and the implementation onto a campus. I also love the idea of like surveying your staff, like what are their needs? I mean, if you have a one-off and you get feedback that it wasn't for them, obviously that wasn't the model. A one-size-fits-all situation wasn't what your staff needed. Sometimes, like if it's entry level and maybe the staff doesn't have very much information on it, a one-off is great because everyone's coming in with kind of at the same starting point. But if it's an initiative that it's maybe going on for a year or 2 years, people are going to be at different levels based on what their classroom looks like and what steps they've taken based on what they've learned. So, at that point, yeah, you need to get that feedback from your staff to understand what's the next step in the professional development process to meet their specific needs and not just make it a one size fits all.
Yeah. And I want to mention, because you had a really awesome, rich discussion about follow-up. And the thing, I love surveys. They're fine. They're great data, whatever. I don't love anonymous surveys. I'm just going to say that.
No.
But I really do appreciate the fact that can happen too you might not have, for example, student achievement results, but you might have some data from walkthroughs. If that's what your team has established, you're looking for a very specific teaching strategy, for example, and you can, as the administrator, go through and collect that data and share it out with the staff here, and keep that, keep baseline and keep growth data, because, if we're really wanting to change the culture of the school and change our practices, we can't just go on feeling, right? We have to have some hard data to share too. So, and also I just think too, sometimes we forget that asking directly questions about how was this PD? Is there something better that we can do next year? Just having those one-on-one meetings with our staff is, I think, something that we shouldn't forget about. And the team was talking about how they do that. And I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Sarah, because surveys have a place and they're beneficial at certain points. But if that's all you're doing to gain feedback, it's probably not the best thing. So you can definitely have informal conversations, or they even talked about PLCs and having planning time and getting feedback that way. So, I mean, there's a lot of different models and things that you can implement to make sure that you're getting the most efficient and effective feedback from your staff that's genuine, that for a fact that this is what's going to happen. And if you can have a safe conversation, one with a trusted teacher about, hey, what did you gain from this? What is your team saying? What's the like get a pulse of what's going on. Obviously, you're going to make a better decision moving forward as far as the professional development plan.
Absolutely.
All right, Sarah. Well, I'm going through my notes, and I think we've hit quite a bit of the conversation, but obviously we didn't hit everything. For those who missed, I hope that you'll be able to join us next week. We're going to have a fantastic guest. Hopefully you can jump into Facebook and see that on social media as we announce that. But Sarah, you were fabulous this morning. I love seeing you in the Admin Mastermind meeting, and I know everyone that was there really loved seeing you in that space. So I want to thank you not only for being with the Admin Mastermind, but then also, joining now for the recap.
Thank you. And I want to say that for those of you that have not had a chance to join live, do it. It's a really cool crew, and you've created a nice community in there that is really dialed in, cares about one another, and is just ready to grow. So what a joy to be a part of it. Pleasure was mine.
So if you need any support with professional development, obviously you can reach out to the Teach Better team. You can reach out to Sarah. She has a ton of experience, and this is what she does now. So make sure that you're reaching out. We would love to support you in any way. Our social media handles are on the screen, but you can also reach out for myself, Joshua at teachbetter.com, or you can reach out to the team, teachbetter.com also. And with that, we will see you next Tuesday.